Good evening. I'm happy to welcome all of my fellow board members and call the September 22nd, 2020 school board meeting to order. We continue to modify meeting processes in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Public attendance is permitted on a limited basis, allowing for 30 persons in addition to staff and board members to be present. All public comments will be in person this evening. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Present.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Present.
And Mrs. Campbell?
Present.
The board will now hold a moment of silent reflection in memory of one of our BPS family members who recently passed away, Amir Ba, a kindergarten student from Sea Park Elementary. Thank you. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I would like to offer my fellow board members and Dr. Mullins the opportunity to recognize students, staff, or members of the community. Who would like to start us off this evening?
I only have one.
Ms. McDougall.
I just have two, and I want to give a shout out to Merritt Island and Edgewood's volleyball team this weekend. They both had wins. I think it's their first opening game, so congratulations to both teams, and that's all I have today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Who'd like to go next? Ms. Campbell.
So I wanted to give a shout out to the student services team. I was able to ask Chris Moore who it was, so I know what you did. They put together a virtual calming room for our staff, if you guys saw that in the superintendent's bulletin. And if you didn't get to play with it, it actually is a lot of fun. And I thank the team for putting it together in such a way that everybody has different things that help them calm. And they did it specifically because this year, above all years, everyone is at a high stress level. And so for our staff to go in, if you're a person that listening, for me, waterfalls with birds chirping isn't it, but they had piano music. You can go and watch pandas for 5 minutes. There's some yoga breaks. There's some if you've got 5 minutes to de-stress, doing at home, something that brings joy, something that brings calmness. So it's like pages and pages. So if you had specific names that we can thank Ms. Moore. All right, so Kim Bias and Kathleen Erdman, thank you for putting that together for our staff so that they can just take a little break in the middle of the day or at home or anytime, or just like I've had it streaming while I was studying for the agenda. So it's a great resource.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Ms. Deskovich?
I have one. We're going to give a shout out to Amelia Curran. She is a student currently at Mel High, but last year she was at Hoover and she competed in a science research competition. The National Premier Middle School STEM Competition is what it's known as, and she is one of the top 30 finalists in the country. And I'm going to read you the title of her science research project, just to see if any of you are smart enough to know what this is. It says, comparing the efficiency, free fatty acid percentage, and carbon dioxide emissions of waste vegetable oil and Ethiopian mustard biodiesels. So congratulations, Amelia. We are proud of you and are thankful that you are representing Brevard Public Schools.
Thank you, Ms. Deskovich. And interestingly, I don't know if you read the entire thing, but I guess she learned a lot about fuel from her dad, who's a race car driver.
Yeah.
So what a cool way to incorporate that experience. Yeah, great. Mr. Susan.
So thank you, everybody. I wanted to first off say, Ms. McDougall, since you threw it out there that there's all these athletic competitions going on, I think we should renew our rivalry that we have.
Oh, no.
I don't know if you guys remember, but the last year, Cocoa, did they win against Rockledge? I couldn't remember.
Oh, be quiet.
So I think that we should redo this. We were able to keep a principal. If you remember, his job was on the line, that he had gotten hired the week before. If he didn't win, he was going to lose. So I think that we should renew that. So I'm open to suggestions to how you want to do that.
Okay.
I think it'll be fun this year. And I think that if any other school board members want to chime in, we've got some rivalries now. We're going to be able to return our football play back to some rivalries that haven't been able to in the past. So here we go, let's have some fun. So yes, there's some teams are better than others. So I think that those rivalries will
They're
determine.
all fabulous, Mr. Susan.
They're all fabulous, but Coco's the best, so what can
Before
I
the
say?
game, I guess. So, anyways, tonight I had the amazing honor of honoring a group of individuals that stepped forward twice. And the first time the Office Depot team stepped forward was during our COVID crisis. So many of you remember that we had a situation where we had to go out and put together some kind of gratitude towards our food service workers. Well, Dan from Office Depot said, let's go even further than that. I know that the kids inside the schools are hurting, so he put together 300 packages for 25 for each school so that they could go out to the low-income areas. Nice. That came out of each one of their stores. All the Office Depots throughout the county participated, and they were able to, Dan drove, what's that little car you were driving with all that stuff in it? I mean, it's tiny. It's like it's like half a car, and he had all them boxes in the back. And he's, the heart that these individuals have, I wanted to say, during that COVID crisis was massive. But then something else happened. Unbeknownst to me, Dan started collecting not only supplies, but he started putting on the front of each one of the actual, when you go to check out, would you like to donate to a Title I school? And they did that in every one of the stores throughout the district. And the recipient school, and as many of you know, I don't know anything that happens at Croton Elementary because my wife runs there and she doesn't want me anywhere near there. So the recipient school was Croton Elementary School. So they went through this process, and all of a sudden I got this call from Croton saying, hey, we've got a big check coming here and a lot of supplies. And so they brought this with the idea that there's going to be a workforce in STEM project that comes out of this. Did you want to talk to that, Miss Susan, or would you like me to kind of speak to it? How would Mrs. Susan? No, I would like to give you as much of the floor as possible. So, but I just wanted to take a second, honor them for bringing a $2,000 check to Croton Elementary. But the project, we even have Mr. McGinnis from O'Galley High School who was here today to talk, you know, to kind of type it in. So, Ms. Susan, you can have the floor, and if you would like to, Mr. Dan, if you would like to speak too on what the project was. You just walk up. The shorter one's for you, the taller one's for Dan.
So I was actually talking with my guidance counselor about some of our students. It's not going to be high enough. Thank you, Dr. Mullins. Thank you. And we were talking about some of our students who tend to have some difficulties behaviorally, academically, and a lot of it is them not feeling like they have a path to move forward on. They don't have a dream or goal to achieve. And I know that that's a big focus with our CTE programs here in Brevard, but there's not a connection from the elementary up to the secondary. So in talking with one of our other teachers on campus, I was saying, well, you know, what can we do STEM-wise for our kids? We have this awesome check coming, this great opportunity. And she said, well, what about that aviation program over at O'Galley? Have you seen the stuff that's been coming out of there lately? So I did a quick Google search, and not that I don't hear about it from time to time, but I was just floored by the things that Mr. McGinnis's program is doing. So we are going to use the donation from Office Depot to help to purchase items to create a lab at our school where we can coordinate the program over at O'Galley with our elementary students to help them to see the path and to get some training so that they know. Sorry, these masks are really hard to talk to, and even harder when you're giant and pregnant. So they can engage with some of the students. Obviously, right now, it's going to have to be virtually because of our COVID guidelines, but letting those high school kids kind of step in and mentor and help train some of our students to help them see the path that's in front of them and the opportunities that exist right here in Brevard and their local feeder high school. So that's what we're planning on, and we really appreciate all the support from Office Depot. They came in with, if you think the small car was packed back then, Mr. Susan, you should have seen what it looked like when they showed up on our campus. So we're very grateful for their partnership and their support. And Mr. McGinnis, the wonderful work that you're doing over there that's kind of started all of this that our kids have to look forward to.
Thank you, Ms. Susan. Mr. Dan, do you want to say anything?
Well, we were just happy to be a part of it, and it's something where, this is Office Depots across the country. We got to look in our local community, and we got to choose a school that we wanted to have everybody pull the resources together for. And so it was the items collected and everything was the fact that we were starting to do it with where it was just going to be a monetary check was new to this year. So we had, over the course of, I think last year, I worked with Sherwood Elementary, so we get to choose a Title I, and I loaded up the car again, and we brought stuff over there. And so it was kind of amusing to me that when the parade started for the, working with the food services and being able to give out the goodie bags and the collection of stuff when, COVID broke out, and we were kind of scrambling for a reaction to make sure that people weren't falling through the cracks and things like that. So it was kind of amusing that the parade started over at Sherwood. I was like, hey, I know my way there. So, and then I had all this stuff collected for Croton as my new Title I choice here. And so I had all this stuff in the office. It's been hanging out there with me for the longest time. So when they took the approach of, hey, we want to have all the stores in the area, we're not going to be collecting goods right now. We want to just we want to be able to bring it to our customers to say, hey, do you want to help your local Title I school? And we had the little saying that we did with all the customers, and it pops up when you go to check out, and it's, hey, did you want to help some children in need at our local Title I school? Even $1 helps. And just reaching out to the community, the feedback was fantastic. So we had, for our local stores, we had the store in O'Galley here with Mr. Scott. We had the store in Palm Bay with Mr. Wilson. My store in Vieira, and then Mr. Corey wasn't able to join us today. He had to work today, but the store just off of 192 across the mall there. Our 4 stores were able to put together just shy of $2,000 there for delivery, and then we had the program going till, when was you said, towards the tail end of October, so we should have another one coming as well. So. And then the fact that this is being put towards just planning ahead for the future, giving just the Brevard County kind of making that stamp in just what makes this area great, and just putting it towards that STEM program, I think is going to be fantastic. So we can't wait to continue with it and just be able to give back, which has been fantastic and an honor to be included.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. One of the issues that they have is that in our STEM programs, Mr. McGinnis could talk about it, but we're not going to let him up there because he'll take everybody's dollars. Last time I hung out with him on my own, I ended up with less money, and every group he ever goes to get, he ends up raising more money than any man I've ever seen. But Mr. McGinnis's program, one of the problems we have is many of our middle schoolers don't even know what programs we have. Many of our community don't know what we have. So this gives an opportunity for the first time for our elementary schools to have a pipe all the way through, so that those children who may not be the best kids in the world as far as being inspired when they come in to do books, can be inspired that one day I can be an aviation tech, I can be a pilot, and I can work with Mr. McGinnis. So it's kind of a cool concept. I think it's awesome. They've got Boeing, Grumman, and a couple other groups that are going to be working with them. So I just wanted to say thank you, and that's it. So I'll give you guys a round of applause.
Thank you, Mr.
And I
Susan.
didn't take time last time, so I doubled it this time, just so everybody knows. That's what this is about. So, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mullins?
Thank you, Ms. Belford. Actually, my highlight was taken ahead of me. I was going to highlight Amelia from Hoover Middle School as well, but I'll take this opportunity to remind our community that we are the science research leader in the state because of the amazing science research teachers and science teachers, math teachers, engineering teachers we have in our district who just come and inspire our kids and give them a glimpse of the vast world that's before them and challenge them to find new ways to tackle the questions that remain that make our world an ever-growing and better place. So thank you to the science teachers at Hoover, and I don't know where Amelia went to elementary school, maybe Indialantic Elementary, but
We're going to go with that.
there you go. That helped add to her inspiration to be a science leader as an 8th grader. So
Wow.
thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. So my shout out this evening is actually to the Pilot Club of Titusville. Was visiting one of my schools the other day, and in the principal's office there was this huge basket, and she said, "Would you like some Skittles?" And I was like, "No, it's an odd thing to offer, but thanks." And she was explaining to me that the Pilot Club of Titusville had put together, it was so cute, just a little bag of Skittles, not like a small bag, but a bag of Skittles tied up with a note of appreciation for all of the faculty and staff at the school. And so definitely want to thank the Pilot Club of Titusville for reaching out to our schools. But I also want to publicly ask that others join with them, because I feel like our teams are working so hard with so many challenges right now. Our administrators, our teachers, our staff members that are at the schools. It's been an incredibly challenging year, and I know we're working on ensuring that we're stopping by and thanking and sending emails of appreciation and those sorts of things. But I feel like if as a community we could really come around our schools right now and make sure that we're reaching out to them, whether it's just a handwritten note or sent emails. Would love it if every organization in our community could adopt the school closest to them, and just do something to recognize those staff members at the school, to let them know how very much they're appreciated right now, and just some realization for the challenges that they're working through, and really still doing a great job in serving our students. So thanks to the Pilot Club, and may they be a guiding light for others. All right. That is going to bring us to the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Mullins.
Ms. Belford and members of the board, on tonight's agenda, we have administrative staff recommendations, 2 presentations, 13 consent items, and 1 action item. The changes made to the agenda since being released to the public on September 15th are as follows. There were revisions to item A7 on administrative staff recommendations. Additionally, the presentations were renamed to be more reflective of the content. Following the conclusion of the rule development workshop, the information item on policy 8420.02, emergency policy requiring face coverings, was removed, as the policy process will begin again due to substantive changes.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. McDougall. Any discussion? Please vote.
Huh. I don't know why mine's not showing up.
Come on, McDougal.
I just not, there's no voting thing there for me. Oh, here it is, sorry. Hey Pam, do you have a minute? Come over here and look, because there's something that I can't.
Somebody else? Tina, is yours messing up?
He's getting there. It's got a hand crank on it.
See, it's like, I can't go down any further.
Go down. Use this one.
This one?
Scroll down.
This one here?
No, this one right here. Go down. There you go.
Oh, shoot.
Get up. I don't know why it went back up.
Quick.
There you go.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Pam.
Was it user error?
Yes, it was user error.
I'm good, yeah. I just go out back in.
And the motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins, would you please let us know about the administrative staff recommendations?
Yes, Ms. Belford, on item A7, there are 6 persons for the board to consider.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Is that a 5-0, Ms. Escobar? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins.
Item A8 is to approve the appointment of the Assistant General Counsel candidate, Ms. Valerie Londano, pursuant to the terms of the attached employment contract.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Was that you, Ms. Campbell, on the
Yes.
second? Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Any discussion? Can I just throw in a hallelujah on that one? I think
Yeah.
it's been a long time coming and going to be a great thing for Mr. Gibbs as well as the district. Please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins, will you please tell us about the presentations you have this evening?
Ms. Belford and members of the board, tonight we have two superintendent reports. I will present a financial outlook update portion, and then Ms. Nada Francis, Assistant Director of Testing and Accountability, will provide us the presentation on state and federal accountability. Give me just a moment. All right, this evening, I want to continue to give the board and our community financial outlook updates as they come to us as a school district. There are several different reporting agencies, and we've presented in the past. So the most recent financial outlook is an analysis provided by HBEC Group, Inc., and they have done some financial analysis actually specific to Brevard Public Schools in the past, but this was a statewide analysis, and it broke down district by district, and it was provided to us. Before we take a look at that, I want to just remind the board and the public of the Florida Economic Update that was provided on August 25th. Ms. Cindy Lisinski, our Chief Financial Officer, presented the results of the Economic and Demographic Research Estimating Conference held on August 14th. And at that estimating conference, identified a projected reduction in revenue in the 2021 fiscal year of $3.4 billion and a projection of approximately another $2 billion in 21-22. Based on that projection and using the most recent loss of revenue impact of that magnitude for the state of Florida, we went back to fiscal year 2008, where during the Great Recession, where Brevard Public Schools, due to the loss of the state lost $2 billion in revenue. We lost revenue that year through mid-year budget reductions totaling $13.5 million. That was in 2007-8 school year. By using that same process and extrapolating current state revenue loss, the $3.4 billion, it was an estimate of approximately $22.4 million reduction estimated for this year using that projection. There were some assumptions based on that, the EDR report, which assumed the state does not use reserves to offset the revenue shortfall, and that the state would cut proportional across all entities that receive general revenue funds, which public education, the FEFP formula, is funded through general revenue. Now, the Long-Range Financial Outlook Report, of the LRFO, was adopted on September 10th, and it is a constitutionally required report that provides a comprehensive forecast of the general revenue expenses, and it follows the report that I referenced previously. The current report is provided as a link to this presentation for the public to view, and it projects through fiscal year 23-24, and it was adopted by the Legislative Budget Commission. There are some assumptions in that financial outlook. First, that CARES Act funds can be used to replace reductions in state revenues and projections. So that report, or that outlook, does make the assumption that the state can use CARES Act to reduce or replace reductions in state revenues. However, there are specific cautions that the CARES Act specifically can prohibit the use of funds to replace lost revenue. Things change day to day, week to week. Certainly, that could present some change, but I present that as one of the assumptions. In addition, it projects that there will be no general revenue budget deficits for 2021. So HBEC Group then takes that projection and had two objectives in providing feedback to districts across the state. And that was to develop calculations to forecast the impact on districts if CARES Act funds cannot be used to replace the lost state revenues, as well as project the impact on districts if the legislature reduced spending to match the loss of revenue and non-recurring general revenue. The assumptions for HBC's analysis does not attempt to project how the legislature might use reserves to address budget deficits, and the use of reserves obviously would reduce the impacts in the projection if that were to be the case. So the findings provide us with information to evaluate adverse conditions that might be encountered and allow us a forecast of what we need to be considering and preparing for. It's interesting that this analysis done by HBEC is rather consistent and, to the projection that was done by EDR. In a projection of a 3.86% loss of FEFP funding for 2021, approximately just under $22 million. So very close to the extrapolated projection that we made after the EDR report. If there was further reduction to address both recurring and non-recurring general revenue loss, the budget impacts could be as much as almost $29.5 million. HBEC acknowledges that in their analysis, it neither estimates nor reflects any action by the legislature, again, to reuse reserves. If the legislature does take steps to reduce the base budget in 2021, the projected impact for 21-22 would be a better forecast as well. So early adjustments would obviously make favorable conditions better later on. And the CARES Act funding or other federal funding can be used to replace loss of revenues. There may be no reductions in the 2021 budget. But again, that we have not been provided any assurance that that would be the case. I wanted to just remind the board and the community that we are taking these forecasts and outlooks with action, and that is prudent steps moving forward to ensure that we maintain and sustain the financial stability of the organization. We continue to analyze positions as they become vacant and determine if those are critical and necessary for filling at this time. We have restricted out-of-county travel. We continue to monitor our contracts for potential savings and opportunities to reduce those. We continue to evaluate our CARES Act funds in an effort to maintain workforce stability. We are continuing to work with the county and their CARES Act dollars for additional support and assistance in our efforts to manage COVID-19 in our schools. They've been very responsive and supportive as we've continued to walk that out. We're continuing our district-wide position analysis moving forward if there's a necessity to reevaluate positions across the district moving forward. And Ms. Lisinski is working on the quarterly rebudgeting process to evaluate lapse, so we have a more regular picture of exactly what our standing is moving forward. I would share with the board that at this time we have not received any additional assurances from the Department of Education beyond the emergency order with past first semester of this school year. We are on the eve of FTE. That's where we formally assess and count our students. That gets submitted to the state for funding, often called as October FTE. That process, that formal process is still in place, and our staff are beginning to prepare for what's called pre-FTE that starts next week. So with that, I'll take any questions from the board, or I will introduce Ms. Nada Francis, who will come and talk to us about state and federal accountability.
Do any board members have any questions for Dr. Mullins before we transition? All right, thank you for the update, Dr. Mullins.
You're welcome, and as we, there have been a lot of changes. We know that state accountability was put on pause for last year. We do not have school grades this year, and students obviously do not have state accountability assessments going into this school year. And there have been a lot of questions about what does that mean, what are the impacts, how does that look moving forward? And Ms. Nada Francis, our Assistant Director of Testing and Accountability, I tell you what, she is the go-to person across the state because she is the guru of testing and accountability. She has put together a brief presentation for the board and our community to better understand what testing and accountability looks like moving forward. So, Ms. Francis, just have the
Ms. Belfort, members of the board, Dr. Mullins, good evening. This evening, I will provide you with a brief summary of the state and federal accountability system. There are 5 components that comprise of the school grade. That is achievement, learning gains, middle school acceleration, college graduation rate, and college career acceleration. Keep in mind that in these components, all students are included. That means your ESSA students and your ELL students are included in all 5 components of the school grade. Oops. The first one is achievement. It's worth 100 points, but there are 4 achievement components. The achievement components include all students enrolled. They have to be full year enrolled. And the calculation is based on any student that scored a level 3 or better on the current assessment. And it is English language arts, grades 3 to 10, math, grades 3 through 8, and it also includes algebra and geometry. In science, it's grades 5 and 8, and and high school biology. Social studies, it's grade 7 civics and U.S. history in the high school. I keep going backwards. Then there are 4 components for the learning gains. The learning gains components, although there are 4, there are 2 that are learning gains for all students, and that's how it's calculated for all the students that are tested and have a prior year score. And then there are the lowest 25%. The lowest 25% component is a subset of all of the learning gains. So a student could potentially, who is a low-performing student, can potentially count twice if they're a low-performing student. So when we calculate the learning gains, we calculate the learning gains for all students. Then we calculate the learning gains for the lowest 25%. So that subset could be the same students that are the low-performing students. Currently, the way that they calculate the learning gains is they look at prior year. So it would have been 2021 calculated looking at the 2019 scores, because the student has to have a prior year score. The state is proposing an adjustment for just the 2021 school grade, and that would be to look at what they're calling prior year. So what does that mean for our students? That means that a student that is in 5th grade would have their learning gains calculated based on the 3rd grade score. And so nothing is final until the learning gains have to have legislative approval, even though it is for 1 year as of today. Because all the information that I'm providing you is the latest information that we have been provided by the state of Florida as of this afternoon. I'm sure that things will evolve and things will change, but that's what we know to be true right now. Learning gains are calculated for ELA and mathematics, and the mathematics includes the algebra and the geometry. So there are 5 ways that a student can make a learning gain. A student can make a learning gain by going from one level to the next or multiple levels. So they can go from a level 2 to a level 4, from a 3 to a 5. They can, if they're a level 5, that's the second way, if they're a level 5 and remain a level 5, that student is also considered to have made a learning gain. The interesting thing when you look at the learning level 5 is that students, sometimes you'll see that they drop in scale score points, but as long as they move from a level 5 to a level 5 in the next year that they're tested, so this would be a prior year, then so a 6th grade student will not have a 4th grade student would now have a 6th grade test, and they would have to remain a level 5. And I'll give you a little bit of an example coming up. Level 3 and level 4 students, they remain the same. They just have to increase 1 scale score point. Level 2, there are subcategories. You go from the low level to the high level, but the students have to move within those subcategories. And level 1 has 3 subcategories, and they go from the low to the middle to the high. So this is an example. If a student in 3rd grade in 2019 scored a 254, so that would be a low level 1, in order for that child to be considered to have made a learning gain in 2021, they are now in 5th grade, they would have to score a minimum of a 273. An example of a level 4 moving to making a learning gain, a student in grade 3, again, 5th grade in 2021, would have to go from a 329 to a 336. The mathematics gets a little bit more difficult because normally students that from 7th or 8th grade will take that algebra. But because we're missing a grade level, current 8th grade students who would take the algebra were in 6th grade. So if you're looking at a 6th grade student who had a 325 and is now going to go into algebra, they have to score a level a 497 as a minimum. The middle school acceleration is one of the other components that the state is proposing an adjustment. The way that it's normally been calculated is they look at any student that is currently in 8th grade, and then they look to see, based on that, what prior year, how did they score? If they were a level 3 or better, they're included in the denominator in the pool of students that they're going to look at. Then they also look at any student that is enrolled in an algebra class, a geometry class, or who took a high school industry certification test. Keep in mind that the high school industry certification is lagged. The proposed change is that they're going to look at the prior year. So middle school acceleration, the students that are currently in 8th grade will look at the 6th grade, and that can absolutely pose problems. And I'll show you a little bit what I mean by that. Again, this requires state board approval, so nothing will be final until the state board approves these proposed changes. So due to COVID, what are the changes and what are the impacts? Some of the impacts and the highest impacts that we've seen, that I believe we will see, are the learning gains in the elementary schools. There will not be learning gains for 4th grade because the current 4th graders were in 2nd grade when in 2019. So for this year, we will look at learning gains for 5th graders and 6th graders, and that is an impact of approximately 5,600 students that will not have the learning gains. So imagine the impact on our schools that are your lowest performing, your struggling schools that depend on the learning gains to make a difference with their students, because they may not be able to acquire that level 3, but nonetheless, they're still making those learning gains, and then those students that are in the lowest 25% are counting double. The other piece is the industry certification. Although we made every effort to try and test our students before we were shut down for COVID, we're still not going to show the same numbers, and the industry certification certainly helps the middle school acceleration, and it helps the high school acceleration component. The number of students included in the calculation for middle school acceleration is also a problem. Our 6th grade students normally outperform all the other students in the state. I believe last year we were number 7 in the state when it came to the performance of our 6th grade students. And so 67% of them performed at a level 3 or higher. When I looked at the 2019 7th grade students to see where they were, only 62% of them performed at a level 3 or higher. So that means that we're now starting with a larger pool of students for the middle school acceleration that are included that now have to make a level 3 or better. Now keeping in mind that we have the COVID slide, that some of the students are e-learning, some students are not going to want to come to school to take the test because they're choosing to opt out for the FSA. There are a lot of components that can have a negative impact on this. Now, the last piece that I want to bring to your attention is the 95% tested. The 95% tested, although if the schools don't test the 95%, Dr. Mullins can certainly file an appeal, and we just need to make sure that the students that are tested are reflective of the population that they represent. So we look at the file at the state census, and we make a determination based on the information the state is sending us. So we can certainly file an appeal for that. But keeping in mind that all of the fact that students are e-learning, The fact that parents don't want to bring their kids in for testing, that may also impact the percent tested. The graduation rate, the guidelines are set forth by the U.S. Department of Education, and it's based on the percent of students that graduated with a standard diploma within 4 years. Keep in mind that the standard diploma also includes your ESSA students, your exceptional education students. College and career acceleration, the cohort is the graduation cohort. So the students that are in the denominator, the pool of students that graduated are expected by the state of Florida standards to have done one of these things, and I'll go through them in a minute, in order to be counted positively in the college and career acceleration. They scored a level 3, 4, or 5 in College Board Advanced Placement exams, a 4, 5, 6, or 7 in the International Baccalaureate exam, a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 in an Advanced International Certificate of Education exam, a C or better on an approved dual enrollment class, an industry certification. So this is just an example, and the numbers on here do not represent the district. They don't represent any school. I just wanted to give you some numbers so that we can have a total. So for elementary school, there are 7 components that are counted in school grade. The 7 components are achievement, learning gains, and learning gains for your lowest 25% in ELA. Mathematics is the same thing, achievement, learning gains, and lowest 25%, in addition to science. For the middle school, there are 9 components, and that includes social, it's the first 7, plus the social studies and the middle school acceleration. For the high schools, there are 10 components because it is the first 7, social studies is history, and then of course graduation rate and college and career acceleration. For the district and for those schools that are combination schools, it's 11 components, so it is added up all of the components count. So for this example, we earned 681 points, 11 components, that's 62% of the points, and overall of an A. And this is, the state will calculate for every school, and then they determine where do you fall within what range, and that's how it is determined what your school grade is. So the next piece that I want to talk briefly about is the Federal Accountability System, and it's the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, and that's replacing the No Child Left Behind. The main focus of the ESSA is to focus on reporting the students' subgroups, the adjustment for at least the 95% tested. This is where it gets a little bit tricky because what they mean about that adjustment is if a student does not test the 95% for school grade, remember I stated that Dr. Mullins can file the appeals. We work with the schools. For the adjustment for ESSA, for any student, so let's say that a component for ELA, you did not make your 95% tested. They're going to add back the students that did not test, and they're going to add them as a negative impact. So I always think of them as adding them back as a level 1 student. So that definitely will impact. So sometimes you'll look at an ESSA report in comparison to what the school grade report is, and you'll notice that the percent of proficiency for ELA is a little different than it is reported in ESSA. It could definitely be the 95% tested. The other piece that is the ELA language learners proficiency progress that is added, that's the last component that has been added to the ESSA Federal Point Index. And what they're doing is they're looking at what we normally call WIDA, but the real name of the test is, the WIDA is the consortium, but the name of the test is the Access for ELS, or the alternate Access for ELS. So they are going to look at language proficiency or language acquisition between one test and the next, and the students they're going to measure, it's almost like a learning gain, but it's for a language acquisition. So that's the last component that is being included in the ESSA. So ESSA, as you can see, the first 11 components are the same. The ELP is different, which is the language proficiency progress for progress of English language learners. And when you look at it and you total the number of points, there are 12 components and it's 67%. we have to meet the magic number of 41 in order not to be, for there not to be any sanctions. For the federal point index, which is this calculation that I just showed you that encompasses all, if you're not at 41 or better, then you're considered to be in comprehensive support and improvement. Then there is the federal, targeted support and improvement, which has to do with every single one of the subgroups. So they'll look at every single one of the subgroups to determine, are they making progress? Are they making gains, et cetera, et cetera? And if any of those fall below the 41, then the schools fall into the targeted support and improvement. And a school, yes, can have multiple. They can have white and African Americans and Hispanic students that are not meeting that 41%. Are there any questions?
Board members have questions for Ms. Francis? Ms. Deskovich?
Thank you, Nada. You're so amazing with all
Well,
of
thank
this. We appreciate you very, very much. Just a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
One, are we tracking, do you track iReady scores too, or just?
We do. I do work with Mrs. Klein and her team to track the iReady scores.
Okay,
Yes.
so are we keeping an eye on that to have some idea?
Absolutely,
How-
Mrs. Klein. I'm waiting for her directive to tell me exactly when I need to start working on the tracking.
Okay, and the previous, you guys have sent us like summary-ish. Okay. Great, that is what I want to see, because we need to know if we need to be panicking or if we're in good shape and get some idea. So I appreciate that. Also, I noticed you didn't include ROTC credits for.
That will not come into play until 2022.
Oh,
So they're still working out how they're
Okay.
going to collect the data, because apparently the vendors don't speak to each other, so they have to make all of those behind-the-scenes things that happen. Yep. So
Okay.
2022 is when JROTC will come into.
And I think they had to have, if I remember the legislation right, they had to have been participated in it for 2 years, which, right? The JROTC
but they
legislation.
could have already participated the last
Right.
2 years,
Yeah.
even last
Right,
3
right.
years. So it doesn't,
But
clock doesn't
fair.
start for them in 2021, it just starts for reporting, right? Okay. And then my last question is about the 6th grade. It's math you're talking about when you said our scores are really high, correct? I don't remember.
Yes,
English-
it's
I don't
math.
remember language arts being
Absolutely,
high,
yes,
but
it's math.
So I'm just trying to get my brain around. So if we're using 6th grade scores for 8th graders this year, correct?
So the determination for the middle school acceleration is the denominator, the pool of students that they're going to pull. They're going to look at all 8th graders, and then they're going to say, do you have a score in 6th grade, and were you a level 3 or better? If you were a level 3 or better, you're being included in the automatically included in the calculation.
So we're going to be probably comparing Algebra 1
Yep.
scores. I'm guessing we're going to be comparing algebra or geometry scores to a 6th grade, and they're going to have those learning gains if we're doing 8th graders, yes?
They are going to have, okay, so there are two things. So the learning gains, a student who had a 7th grade test, and then now in 9th grade is taking algebra, they're going to do the learning gains compared for the algebra to the 7th grade. The same, so they're looking at whatever score you have in mathematics prior to create a learning gain. The same thing will happen for ELA, but it's more difficult when you're looking to go from algebra to geometry, or if you didn't have an algebra test because you were in 8th grade last year, you took algebra, 9th grade, you don't have a score for, and in 9th grade, you're taking geometry, so now they're going to go back and compare your score to your 7th grade.
We did fairly well in algebra
We did.
last,
We-
but
we-
probably not as well as our 6th grade math scores. I'm guessing it's just, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Thank you.
It's a difference of 976 students that we're adding to the denominator, potential 976 students that are being added to the middle school acceleration component denominator that normally wouldn't have been there. It's just because the students in 6th grades always outperform A, the state, and B, our 7th graders. Dr. Sullivan, did you want to add?
That's exactly what I was trying to understand. And
Yep.
that's what I assumed was going to happen. And I think it's going to be harder to show learning gains that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just one component of the score.
So
To-
yeah, so if you look here, you'll see that mathematics still has the learning gains and the achievement. So the students will still be able to score a level 3 or better to count an achievement. The learning gains are there, and then you have the middle school acceleration component that is also added. That's yet one more component of the middle school grade, one of the 9.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes. So you had mentioned from the beginning that the only scores that count in the accountability grading are the students who were there for the entire school year, correct? Is that the same standard for the federal, for ESSA? Do they have the same?
It
No.
is my understanding that it is
Okay.
the same, but I'd like to double check that
Okay.
to make sure that I give you the most accurate
Um,
information.
So the 95% tested, you explained that, but I want to make sure I understood that correctly. So if we, on the 95%, if we get to the end of this year and an individual school doesn't have 95% of their students testing any one subject or whatever, of the ones who have been there full time, right?
Full year
Then
enrolled.
explain to me again what happens there.
So for school grade, for the purpose of school grade, that we'll get a list of schools that'll say an I, and it'll tell us the reason why they were an I, meaning incomplete.
Okay.
And so Dr. Mullins will then direct me to start working with the schools so that we can figure out if the tested students indicate the pocket of the community that they're serving. So for instance, if they have 50% Hispanics, where did they test the Hispanic kids? Are they trying to exclude a specific group?
Right. Is
So
it
if
a
we can
representative?
prove that they actually tested and it's representative of their population, then the state will grant us the appeal and they'll release the school grade. Where it gets a little tricky is with the ESSA.
Right.
ESSA just puts in the kids that they didn't test, and then it'll negatively impact the school.
Right. So, all right. Okay, I'm going to come back to that in just a second. But on graduation rate, I know
Mhm.
that statewide we didn't have grades, but is the federal, are they still doing graduation rates for our federal accountability this year?
So keep in mind that the graduation rate is lagged. So last year's, the class of 2020 is the one that we will be using for this year's
For this
school grade.
coming year? Okay.
Which again can be a problem because although we had a lot of graduates, the college and career acceleration component, so
Because we
could all
they weren't able
impact
to
because of
finish
COVID. Yep.
up the way they usually do.
But it is the 2020 graduating class that will be included in the 2021 school grade.
Okay. And then, hang on, get to the page where I wrote it down. So, on the 95%, back to the 95%,
Okay.
have we had that impact us before? I'm just thinking of some of our schools that have a very transient population, and you've got kids moving in and out, and maybe we don't get the 95%, or maybe as a school that has lots of opt-outs. Has that been, pre-COVID, has that been, how has that affected us before?
We've had a couple of schools that have had an I,
Okay.
but we filed the appeal and it's never negatively impacted with the ESSA.
Okay.
So the only reason I brought it up was because this year and the parents wanting to opt out their students and
Right.
wanting to keep them home, et cetera, et cetera. If we continue on the same path, then we may see an increase in those
Right.
schools.
I know that, and this is my final thought, is that I know that we can't predict what the legislature is going to do, but obviously this year it would be ideal if this year is a kind of a hold harmless year, but it's just to establish a baseline since we had that missing year. Give us our school grades, give us our whatever, but don't base anything off of that because we had the spring, we have this whole year where we're trying to play catch up. Is there any kind of word that has been going around that is a possibility, or that they're asking for that to happen?
So there are a lot of people asking for that specific to happen, and not so much as hold harmless, but to release it and not have any of the sanctions is what it's being requested. And that would be the best case scenario, but I've not heard that they're moving forward with that. But then
Okay.
again, the legislative session hasn't started, so.
Okay, but that would be a legislative decision, not a DOE decision.
Nope.
Okay. I would like to add that to our
Making a note now, Ms. Campbell.
legislative agenda, please.
Got it.
Just 1 second, Ms. Campbell, for your reference, the I schools weren't necessarily our transient schools. So Holland in my district
Yes.
I think it was last year.
It was last year.
Yeah, had more
People who opted out.
yeah, just part of the opt-out movement and wanting to
Yes.
opt out their kids. And so I don't know what COVID's going to bring as far as that.
Right. That's it, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. Ms. McDougall, Mr. Susan, any questions for Ms. Francis?
Nope, thank you.
I have one that I think should be a pretty easy one, Nada.
Okay.
So remember back in the day of AYP, we had subgroups that they analyzed.
Yep.
But our subgroup in Florida was like 10 or something like that.
The cell signs.
And so other places had much larger numbers for their cell size. And so their subgroup data wasn't counted in several areas. And there was a lot of discussion around that. So going back to the ESSA and the subgroup scores, is there a cell size for ESSA?
10.
So it is still 10, and now everyone's on 10.
Well, I'm
So-
not sure if everyone is on 10, because remember, every state had to provide like a roadmap or a proposal
Oh.
that would say, this is what we're going to do, this is
Right.
how it's going to impact. Ours just happens to look very similar to our school grade, because we were doing a lot of the asks by the federal government, so that's why, but yeah. I would absolutely I can check to see if everybody else is on 10, if the cell size is 10 for other states, but
That's fine, don't waste your time on it. I
Okay.
was just curious. You have
Okay.
plenty on your plate.
thank you.
Thank you so much for all that you're doing in this year of craziness to keep abreast of all of this stuff. And please know, if there's anything that the board members can do, obviously we'll add the no sanctions to our legislative platform for discussion. But if any of us can advocate with the state board or with the legislature, please feel free to reach out to us and say, hey, I need your help.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful evening.
Ms. Balfour, may I just add a couple comments, just to remind the board, on October, I want to say 27th, we have a workshop already scheduled to present the board the results of our first progress monitoring for this year. Dr. Sullivan and Ms. Klein will be presenting that information for the board. It was already referenced and alluded to, how are we doing with iReady? I also want to take this opportunity to remind the board that I believe it was last year we initiated our first formal progress monitoring in algebra. Was it last year, Dr. Sullivan, or the year before? Last year. So we were able to launch that progress monitoring district-wide, and I would suggest there will be no more important year to have that tool than this year, as we have kids who have been placed in Algebra 1 based on 2-year prior student achievement data. So we can quickly monitor and get feedback on their progress and make in-time adjustments. So want to thank Secondary Leading and Learning, Dr. Sullivan, for that great insight and the benefits it's going to yield moving forward. And finally, I would just do a shout out to our middle school. I'm going to try and get this right, Nada. Our middle school, Dr. Sullivan, Algebra 1 teachers worked like warriors over this summer to offer Algebra 1 EOC to our kids over the summer. They came in, controlled environments, small groups, and so on. I think, if I remember correctly, we led the state in the numbers of middle school Algebra 1 students who came in to do the assessment. And that gives them the opportunity to test closest to the time they had the course and so on. So that is a credit to our administrators in our middle schools for thinking creatively, to our algebra teachers for making that extra effort to reach out to them, as well as our career and technical education teachers who worked so hard to connect with their CTE kids all through the summer. We had testing, our poor administrators. They were hosting testing throughout the whole summer in our high schools and obviously in our middle schools because it was the right thing to do for our kids. And to give them the opportunity of that reward, that award of accomplishment for the hard work that they persevered through a very difficult year. So just didn't want to lose the opportunity to shout out to our CTE, in particular our math teachers, for continuing to work through difficult circumstances on behalf of our kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins, and thank you to all of our team members that made that possible. We are now at public comments. We have 2 speakers scheduled for this evening. Each speaker is limited, excuse me, to 3 minutes. We have a clock in front of me to help you keep track of your time. When your time is over, you'll be asked to stop and allow the next speaker his or her turn. Always keep in mind that reasonable decorum is expected at all times, and your statement should be directed to the board chairman. The chairman may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when time is up, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. Should an individual not observe proper etiquette, the chairman may request the individual leave the meeting. Let's all encourage an environment appropriate for our children who may be present or watching from home. We will start with our first speaker, Mr. Schifrin, and our second speaker, Kayla Magnuson. When Mr. Schifrin is done, it'll be your turn.
Need my help with the microphone, Mr. Schifrin? Are you good?
Proper. Ms. Belford, Dr. Mullins, school board members, my name is Gary Schifrin. I'm the executive director of the Brevard Association of School Administrators. I want to extend kudos to you this evening in regards to how you have confronted the reopening of our schools. That is not to say that I'm necessarily supportive of face-to-face instruction, while our trends in Brevard are not exactly the most conducive, but I'm fully aware of the position you've been put into by the bureaucrats in Tallahassee. I think it's shameful when politics dictates policy and people's well-being is at stake. Having said that, though, I think you would agree with me that the professionals of the Brevard school system have stepped up and have done an amazing job. Let me repeat that. The professionals of the Brevard school system have done an amazing job. From back in the spring when the decision was made to go 100% virtual and your teachers were suddenly required to convert their lessons to that which could be shown on the TV screen. What a challenge that was, but your teachers put in the time and effort to make it happen, and it was successful. Then, because of direction from those bureaucrats, you are left with few options which did not include continuing 100% virtual. Now the district went into overdrive, and plans were developed for the return of face-to-face instruction. These plans were then shared with the school administrations, and it was time for them to go into overdrive. There were so many contingencies that had to be developed, including the physical layout of buildings and classrooms, the way students would be allowed to walk in the hallways, enforcing the board decision that everyone would wear masks, understanding the flow charts if personnel and students would either test positive and/or come in contact with other individuals who tested positive. And I could go on and on. Uh-oh. Hold on. I'm gonna run out of time. The added responsibilities and additional stress which became the new normal. No one in any of our lifetimes could have anticipated having to deal with what this pandemic has caused. Having said all of this, I now come to the main reason I'm addressing you this evening. And I know with loss of student numbers that finances are probably not very good. But based on what everyone has been put through, based on how your professionals have had to adjust their lives, based on the creative innovations that had to be put in place, even based on the fact that your custodians have to be cleaning around the clock, and so on and so forth, I'm asking for this board to either appropriately compensate your employees or come up with some kind of recognition that will appropriately thank each and every one of them for the unbelievable job they've had to put forth to make all of this work. I know our motto is serving all the students with excellence. In this instance, I think it's equally important to serve all the Brevard public school staff with excellence as well. I welcome the opportunity to brainstorm with you in a way in which we can properly recognize your staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schifrin. Ms. Magnuson?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Ready? All right. On August 21st, parents were emailed asking how our children would be getting home from school. My response was my child will be a car rider. On August 24th, the first day of school, I drove my daughter to school at 7:45 in the morning. I drove to pick her up at 2 p.m., waited for the gate to open at 2:30. As I'm trying to spot my child, a staff member came to my car and told me that she was accidentally taken to aftercare. Honest mistake, my daughter has been in aftercare the past 2 years. But I did not sign her up this year. She wasn't in aftercare. They accidentally sent her on the bus, they thought. Sorry. But they still were not sure. So I immediately drove as fast as I could to try to beat the bus to the bus stop. My daughter is only 7 years old. I wasn't successful, but I had visual of the bus and my child, and I could finally breathe. The school called me right after that, making sure she was safe and actually with me. The principal, the teacher called and apologized. I was humble and I understood mistakes do happen. I was just glad that my daughter was safe. The same night, my ex-husband, who has a no contact order with my children because of his domestic violence and abuse, he was the actual one that they called and apologized to. They did not call the father of my children, which my ex-husband is not the father of either one of my children. They were going off of my 2019 registration paperwork, not my 2020 registration paperwork that I put in well in advance. On August 31st, I wrote a note and emailed and called to say Gina would take the bus on the 31st, the 1st, the 2nd, and 3rd of that week only. And I made sure it said that week only. I also had the email as proof. House updates were being done and I was going to be at the house. From August 4th to the 18th, she had been picked up, no issues in the car loop. Yesterday, I'm back far in the car line. I pull up and they said my child was not there. And they did not know where my child was. I understand my language that I did use yesterday. It was inappropriate and it was wrong. My emotions overtook me and I reacted versus responded, and I apologize for my words. They still did not know where my child was, and I came all the way back to the school after they pulled my child off of a bus to have me trespassed from their school because of my language and the words that I chose to use. I am not the first parent that this has happened to, but this is twice in less than a month that my child is unaccounted for. And nobody knew where she was, again, and seconds matter to me. And that's it.
Thank you. Does any board member wish to respond to any of the speakers this evening?
She gonna go see Ms. Klein over anything that she's got?
I'm sorry?
She gonna go see Ms. Klein over her situation?
It's being addressed.
Okay.
Yep. Dr. Mullins, any response to any of the speakers this evening?
No, thank you.
Okay. That is going to move us into the consent agenda. Dr. Mullins.
There are 13 agenda items under this category.
Does any board member wish to pull any item from the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. McDougall. Is there any discussion? Please vote. The motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins.
Ms. Belford and members of the board, were you on the action agenda? Did I get ahead of it?
We are at the action agenda.
Yes.
You got ahead of me because I got behind.
That's okay.
We will now move on to the action agenda, Dr. Mullins.
Members of the board, the only action item this evening is item G25 on procurement solicitations.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Any discussion? Please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. Does any board member have anything else they would like to report at this time? Mr. Susan, I think you indicated you had something.
Yeah, just, Dr. Mullins, I was just going to follow up on those two. There was the athletic broadcast procedure that we were kind of talking about and the volunteer application policies that we were looking at. Just didn't know, are we still working on them and moving forward? That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Susan. I had met with Ms. Moore yesterday afternoon. She has drafted updated procedures. I reviewed it. We've had a brief conversation about it. I need to follow up with her, but we're prepared to continue taking, we'll have it ready this week.
Beautiful. And then that's the athletic ones, and the volunteer one we're still working on too?
Yes, sir.
Perfect, perfect. And I just had one other thing. Gibbs, you gave out a little memorandum. Are we supposed to come back to you with that? I didn't know, like I got it and I was like, I didn't know what it was.
No, that was just in response, so if you guys get questions, you can answer questions about what the board's role is in negotiations and things. You don't have to do anything with it, it's just for your information.
So if we've got questions about it, come back to you?
Yeah, you can come to me.
All right. I'm good, thank you, Ms. Belford.
Ms. Campbell?
Ms. Belford, I'd just like to remind everybody who may be watching, if you're still with us, that we, just as a reminder, we do have our food nutrition services was approved along with many other school districts across the country to continue basically the summer lunch program during the school year. So all of our students will be, if they get the traditional school lunch and breakfast is always free, but lunch through the end of this calendar year through December. But just want to remind everyone that the deadline for the free and reduced lunch application is coming up soon. Mr. Novelli, do you know what that date is off the top of your head? The free and reduced lunch application deadline, it's sometime in the next couple weeks, right? Second week of October. So even though everybody's going to be getting free lunch between now and December, I just want to remind everybody you need to go ahead and get that application in, because then following December it will be too late to sign up then. So I want to encourage everybody to go ahead if that's something you've qualified for before, or you think you will qualify this year, especially with economic changes, please make sure you fill out that application, which you can find on your school's website.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. That's a great point. And I would suggest that everyone just fill out the application and see if you might qualify, because not only does it apply to potentially reduced cost meals, but also applies to Title I funding for our district and our schools. So really critically important. And a lot of people might think, I would never qualify, but there's a good possibility that they may. So if all parents would just please take a couple of minutes to do that, we would certainly appreciate it, and so would your schools. Mr. Susan, you had?
No, it's just that there's certain schools where families didn't fill it out and they lost their Title I funding.
Yes.
And that supports both for reading and everything you just said. So it's not like it's something that, you just get free lunch. It's all the supports, and it's a considerable amount of support. So thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Campbell. It's a great
Right.
point.
Even if your child packs a lunch every day, it makes an impact on the school.
Yes. Madison last year, the year before, missed it by one student, and they were just crushed. So
Yeah, Roy Allen went from, I think, a C to an A and then lost all their funding.
yeah,
So it's like,
yep, very important. Any other board members have any points of discussion? Dr. Mullins, anything you would like to bring up before we close out the evening?
Okay.
All right, seeing no further business, this meeting is officially adjourned. Have a great night.
Yay.